So what we're excited to talk about here is kind of just, for us, we're just all about multi-chain, cross-chain. And so we have another amazing panel of speakers here talking about the need for cross-chain and multi-chain DeFi as well. So we'll bring on top to stage, we got Cory from Gigster. How's it going, Cory?
I'm doing fantastic. And yourself?
Hey, good. Awesome. Always great having you. Then we'll bring on Alex from Tender Finance.
Hey, man. How are you?
Hey, good. Awesome. We got Will from Rhino.fi, and then John from Liquid Meta as well too.
Hey guys.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining today, and everyone out there watching. Please feel free to drop any questions or anything in the comments. And thank you Dcentral for putting this on. We've got a good panel today. My name is Cory Hymel. I am from Gigster. I lead up all of our blockchain practice and will be your lovely moderator for the next 30, 40 minutes. And we've got a pretty good panel today with some very interesting gentlemen on to be discussing around really the need for cross-chain, right? And as we move into Web3, we've seen this organic growth over time, and what it means for crypto bridges, and what does cross-chain interoperability mean, and what's the implications to that for the market, and what is our projections for the future. And that kind of cross-cuts through a number of different topics, but we're going to have some great discussion here. So again, like I said, in the comments, drop some questions, anything that you want these guys to answer. It will be fantastic. But with that, I want to kick it over for some quick intros. And as we're tiled on the screen, Alex, I will let you go first.
Awesome. Yeah. So my name is Alex Gierczyk. I am the CEO of Tender Finance. We are a DeFi protocol that's working on solving capital efficiency in DeFi. So what I mean by that is, we're DeFi farmers, yield farmers, degens ourselves, and there's a lot of opportunities in DeFi that we try to take advantage of while they last. And doing that is actually very inefficient usually. If you borrow money on Aave, you get maybe 50% LTV, 50% leverage. We're trying to solve that to allow people to collateralize all of their assets and use their capital much more efficiently in the decentralized economy. So that's what we're doing.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And then next I'll do the tile move around. And so John, kick it over to you.
Yeah, hey, I'm John Wiesblatt. I'm the co-founder, CEO of Liquid Meta. We're actually a publicly traded company here in Canada. We trade on the NEO, the OTC pink sheets in the US, Frankfurt in Germany. Our business and our mission is to really be the bridge between traditional finance and decentralized finance. I come from a world of TradFi, and like most of my former colleagues, we're always looking for ways to have better accessibility to this decentralized environment. And so Liquid Meta is building tools, software capabilities in order to bridge that gap. Much like the person before me, we're a liquidity mining operation, the first publicly traded liquidity mining operation, globally speaking, that we know of. We use our own balance sheet to mine liquidity and provide yield to our shareholders. In addition to that, and more important to that is we're building a platform called the MetaBridge. The MetaBridge is going to be a product that is offered to TradFi users looking to more effectively, more efficiently, more seamlessly access these emerging yields across decentralized finance. We do it in a very thoughtful, hedged, and a very diversified manner. So building that technology as we speak today, and currently mining liquidity on our balance sheet. Nice to meet you.
Awesome. And Will?
Yeah, I'm Will. I'm the founder of Rhino.fi, which until last week was called DeFi. So it's a new rebrand. Our mission is to make it as easy as possible to access the best opportunities DeFi has to offer. We started off doing that on Ethereum, and specifically with Ethereum layer 2. So DeFi was one of the first teams to build on a roll-up to make it really cheap and easy to use DeFi on Ethereum. We spent about 2 years tackling all the UX issues associated with scaling Ethereum with rollups, and now we're basically taking that same sort of learnings and skill set of making DeFi as accessible as possible, and applying it to the entire sort of multi-chain universe of DeFi, trying to tackle specifically the problems of friction of using bridges, moving between different chains, paying for gas in different places, different wallets, and making it super easy for people to come and access everything that DeFi has to offer.
Got it. So we've got a good swath, I think, of experience here as well as backgrounds, and you can't see me, can you? Or is it all there? We're back. The squares are back. Yeah. So to kick it off, right? So the whole topic of this is discussing really around, the impact of multi-chain and what all that means. But to kind of set the stage for everyone that's out there, it's always good to kind of set a little bit of context for where we are with everything. So just to kind of put it out there is that, the way that, the DeFi ecosystem has kind of organically grown over time, is this kind of myriad of chains, right? And all of them may have potentially varying overlapping value props that they bring to market, but it all kind of, I think the way to really state it is, Vitalik had put forth this term of, the blockchain trilemma, right? And that's around, around chains being all three decentralized, the security and the scalability. And there was an interesting kind of position that, that the blockchain trilemma can be addressed with this cooperative multi-chain model that will really supercharge like capital optimism for DeFi in the future. And so if we put it in that context, right, and if we're looking at from the point that one of the ways to solve part of the blockchain trilemma and really boost DeFi where it should be in the future looking forward, and if we put it in the context of, what's the problem like without interoperability? Like if we don't address multi-chains and if we don't try to solve this bridging problem, like what happens if we don't do it? I think is kind of an interesting way to look at it. So with that, like, Will, I might kick it to you first and see your thoughts.
So I think there was this belief, maybe even as recently as a year and a half ago, that maybe we wouldn't get this multi-chain DeFi ecosystem. It could have just been one chain to rule them all. Maybe that was Ethereum, Solana, something else that just sort of was able to scale and handle every DeFi application that there should ever be. The reality is very different from that now, and I think it's very hard to kind of stick by that viewpoint. Different sort of solutions are all competing with each other, whether those are Ethereum EVM chains or something completely different. They offer different trade-offs on this trilemma that you spoke about. Some might be maybe slightly less decentralized, but much faster and easier to build on. Others might optimize for different things depending on the application. And so it's clear that at least for the next 5 years, I think we're going to still be in this phase of experimentation. We're going to have all these new solutions, layer ones, layer twos launching. And if we can't offer a single seamless user experience to access all of them, actually it's going to become very difficult for any of those particular solutions to compete with centralized solutions. So if we look at things like Celsius, Binance, which are in a way almost like UX overlays over DeFi, they make it really easy to use all the different chains. But if we want it to happen in a decentralized way, we need great solutions for bridging. We need to really tackle UX issues of this kind of fragmentation that is a result. And so I think DeFi specifically is at this kind of inflection point where either we're going to find a way to make it feel like one seamless decentralized network via interoperability, or actually I think a lot of users are going to end up sticking with the centralized solutions and a lot of the potential of DeFi will be lost.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, looking for future growth, I think I think a lot of times it gets lost at the scale of what we're really trying to push for is so much bigger than where we are. And, Alex, over to you. It's that if we're, when we think about, multi-chain, I think that there's a few different ways to put it, right? And some of the things that are being done now is removing the friction for users that it takes to move in between chains, right? So behind the scenes, a lot of heavy lifting's being done to move, and it's just kind of skinning in the front to say, hey, here's a single pane, and it all, looks, it all looks good. I mean, that seems like the near term, things is being solved, but how do you see that kind of evolving beyond, and is just offering a platform that provides a UX that seems multi-chain, but maybe behind it not, is that the kind of best course in the near term, or do you see like there's maybe a more shift on the near horizon?
Great question. So, there's a couple solutions for multi-chain right now. Bridging, obviously, and so you put one asset in a vault somewhere, and then you mint a new asset somewhere else, and that may require a partnership with whoever is the issuer of that asset. Wrapped tokens are another solution. So if you go onto Binance or Crypto.com and you withdraw to the Crypto.com chain, the Binance chain, that's a wrapped token. So these are solutions that are very convenient right now, but they're not as intuitive as what you were describing, which is like, hey, let me go to Aave, let me deposit on any chain, let me withdraw to any chain. That's very convenient. That doesn't exist yet. I think it will exist. I think that to make that work, there's still some work that needs to be done, because really what that is, specifically that example, that's still using bridging. That's still using wrapped tokens. It's just that it's behind the scenes now, and it's happening in like a rebalance kind of way. Like, oh, we don't have enough Ethereum on the Avalanche network. Let's, discreetly move some Ethereum from, Ethereum mainnet to Avalanche so that there's some money available for people to withdraw. And, and there's some problems with like, well, what if a lot of people withdraw all at once in one chain? Or if you have some chaos, like what happened with Terra, all these things have to be thought about and figured out. But I think at the end of the day, we will have these really beautiful, convenient interfaces that are what we're driving for, and what I think is necessary for this industry to adopt more people, especially less sophisticated people. Right.
Yeah, and that's it's interesting you bring up the Terra example, right? Because I think that where everything is right now in the current market climates is that one of the big talking points around the benefits of creating this multi-chain universe, right, and this interoperability between chains is that it adds and creates the opportunity for so much more liquidity to come to the market, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't kind of like silo it into these kind of niche places that become susceptible to collapse if there's a run on it or something else that goes on, which, John, with that capability, right? So like, let's, with that idea that if we create easier ways for people to move in between chains, that opens the door for more liquidity. And as an overall like economic system of DeFi to stand on its own, like, does having more liquidity like create this more secure kind of environment or platform overall?
So for me, Cory, it all comes down to adoption rates and adoption curves. For the industry to grow, we need greater adoption, we need greater users, like more users, more diversified users, enhanced liquidity, right? So I think it's fair to assume that in order for DeFi to succeed, you need greater adoption rates again and more diverse liquidity. But I want to go back to something that Alex said, because you brought up something really interesting, and you've used the term less sophisticated people, right? So if you look at myself and my background, right, 20 years portfolio manager, TradFi, running a hedge fund, it took me 24 months or more, and I'm still learning how to move from one network to the other, like literally every day, all day, really trying to figure it out. Because unlike some of my peers, my co-panelists, I'm not the guy behind the scenes, coding, new platforms, new protocols, building smart contracts. I'm the typical user that I think you're referring to, but when you say less sophisticated, and also trying to gain that user, people like myself, to acquire greater adoption. Yeah. I don't think until their user experience is more seamless, more frictionless, easier to use, easier to access, safer, right? Or the believability that it's safer to move across chain using bridges. The traditional financial professional, the bulk of the capital in this world that we all want to adopt DeFi in order to make it just a better, more liquid environment. I think that we really need we need the technology and the capabilities to cater more to the less sophisticated. And until that happens, we're going to be stuck in an environment with less liquidity, more crypto savvy technologists running capital through the system. And until we can actually open the doors up to more people like myself, I don't think that we're going to have that exponential growth that we're all anticipating. So that's kind of how I would tie in all of those points.
All right, so we reduce the barrier to entry, right? We make it easier on the back end, and overall, what that allows for is mass market adoption, right, of it, which brings the liquidity, which brings the robustness, makes it more stable, and overall creates this kind of flywheel effects to help it grow.
The way that I think that I would look at DeFi, if I wasn't a co-founder, CEO of a publicly traded DeFi company, if I was an investor, an outsider looking in, the way I look at it is you can compartmentalize all types of investments and strategies, right? So in most large buckets of capital, there's always a portion for alternatives. Alternatives could be distressed debt, private debt, hedge funds, infrastructure, real estate, right? I think when we're looking for rising adoption rates, we want that alternative bucket one day down the road. I don't know if it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, to really be able to add DeFi Web3 to that bucket. And the only way that bucket, that alternative bucket, it adds DeFi, it adds crypto, it adds all of those new emerging technologies to that category, is if user experience improves and if the pipes improve. So that's kind of the way I see things playing out.
Yeah, and that I think it's critical, and we can't like really, hit on it enough. God, if I could talk, we can't hit on it enough around like improving this user experience, because again, like, if you look at the number of active open wallets and stuff, it's still such a small fraction, 1% or something of everyone out there. So we have a lot of, there's a lot of growth opportunities in that. And, really in the near term, and I think that a lot of like traditional market, kind of understanding of this idea of being able to, to move in between chains and being able to change tokens really quickly is one aspect, kind of it. But on the flip side of that, of just being able to move quickly in between chains or across different tokens or different platforms, there is this other idea of like long-term investment within DeFi, right? And what are the implications of being interoperable on that? And, Alex, to flip it over to you, when we think about, collateralizing like whole portfolios for long-term investment in DeFi, right? Because I think that's really going to be the big part that gives it legs, down the road, is this long-term investment vehicle. Like, how important is interoperability to this idea that you're holding an asset for long term? Like, is it even important to be able to move in between chains, or not as much?
Great question. Yeah. So with long-term holding, it's a little different. Like if you're moving around, then it's actually more important to be able to be interoperable, right? With long-term, it's like, okay, you can be a Bitcoin maxi and put your money in a paper wallet and cold storage, and it's years away. Interoperability doesn't matter to you. But if you're someone who wants to make the most of your capital, well, then it does matter. It matters a lot. And in that case, you're interested in being able to collateralize all your different assets. And probably, let's say if the whole crypto market cap is probably like $1 trillion right now, thereabout. I'd say probably 2/3 of that is Bitcoin, Ethereum, and major stable coins. Probably 2/3. The rest of that is everything else. And that's hundreds of billions of dollars, like $350 billion, probably around there. Most of that is not a collateralized asset. Like you can't use that as collateral. So there's a huge need for it. Like there's a tremendous need for it. If you're outside of the major cap coins, you would like to use your capital more efficiently. You would like to generate some yield on it. It's actually very hard to do that right now. So I think that if you have a long-term position in something like that, that's a bit more speculative, then it is more important, even though you have a very long-term position. So I guess it kind of depends on your needs. If you're very bullish and you want to take minimal risk, go put your money in a cold wallet, cold storage. If you're interested in, you still have a long-term thesis, but you're interested in making the most of your capital, then it's a lot more critical. Got it. No, then that's an interesting point, because initially when I was thinking about it, right, when I think about long-term holds or traditional TradFi investing, is that I'm buying a stock of X and I'm going to hold my blue chip stock, and I don't need to move it anywhere for forever. Right. But I guess if you're looking at it from a portfolio management side, they are kind of shuffling and moving things back and forth all the time. And I think that's important for people to understand, is that idea of interoperability kind of transcends beyond just what people see as like the end user, but there also are all of these
management funds and all of these opportunities that can be adapted from traditional finance into into the DeFi world. And so, Will, to kick it over, to your end, is that, I always feel like it's very important, to think about, the builder market that we're in, right? And this is such a huge opportunity for like refocus into, I think as John had said, like building out the pipes, making sure that we're really focusing on this. And as we're entering this, this bear market, this builders market, Will, you had said before, for Diversify and for Rhino, is that, and every other DeFi project that's out there, like this is both a threat, and an opportunity. Could you maybe kind of like unpack what you meant by that?
Yeah, I think there are kind of two major areas, and we've talked about one of them already, which is the UX. And it's really hard even to extrapolate what users will be like of anything that's existing in DeFi, because almost every user is this lead user who loves the challenge of using a new bridge and moving to a new chain, and is willing to do that even if it's difficult, risky, just because they find it fun. But the users that we're trying to build for are not going to be like that. They are going to find that frustrating and annoying, give up. So I think the really key point is, one, that UX, which is just like over the next few years, the thing that everyone needs to be building towards to kind of make it easier, make it possible and safer. But the second actually is, we haven't touched on yet, which is the risk. So interoperability today is this sort of hidden risk that applies to everything in crypto and DeFi, and isn't really that visible. I think if you're building in the space, you know that when you build in a new bridge or use some assets from some other chain, you are obviously adding an extra thing that can go wrong. That bridge can be hacked. We've seen things like Wormhole and others where large amounts of funds were taken. And it's important to remember that in most cases, designs of these chains was to be sovereign standalone chains. Ethereum was never built in mind of having bridges to other chains. And that's the case for a lot of the main chains today. Whereas if we look at Cosmos, actually is one of the examples that was built with the idea of this multi-chain sort of thing in mind. It has IBC, this native low-level protocol that actually it kind of minimizes the risk. It's not riskless, but like puts everything down to the lowest level it can be, and kind of means that if you're building in that ecosystem, you don't need to build a new bridge or have some sort of smart contract that does it. And so there's kind of a whole range of bridges that are out there, but the opportunity to kind of solve these issues around these risks, making them much more transparent and minimizing them as much as possible before the next kind of wave of adoption happens, is I think one of the biggest ones right now. So it's kind of on the one side, improving the safety behind the scenes, and then making the user experience so seamless that users don't even need to know they're moving across chain, because it can be handled by an app like Rhino.fi and lots of others who are building those kinds of solutions. I think today we allow users just to swap between tokens on Polygon and Ethereum layer 2, for example. But when they do that, they don't need to switch to a new wallet. They don't need to have gas on the new chain they're going to, because we pay for it via meta transactions so they just sign in their browser, but we can broadcast on their behalf. And so we can get to a position that's much more seamless. You don't need to go use some other bridge app, because it gets done on your behalf behind the scenes. And so there's a lot of work can be done there. And I think lots of the solutions are clear, but we've now got kind of a year or 2 years to actually build them all out before this. I think before the next wave of adoption can be unlocked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's you mentioned the vulnerability part, which I think is interesting. And do you see? I mean, so in my mind, like one of the main points of the vulnerabilities, and this is going to kind of like really smash you in the face of the ethos of Web3, but that's what we're here to do, right? Is give some counter positions. But I mean, would you see a potential, like, so a potential near-term solve for the vulnerabilities going between chains is that, like if you had one major, call it conglomerate that held a ton of liquidity across a lot of different tokens, right? And then, they basically turned into the superpower at B that provides, all this interoperability, and they do that exchanges behind closed doors as a way to help kind of solve some of those vulnerability risks. I mean, do you see that? I mean, is that even like a possible option?
I mean, I think that It's happening now. Binance is doing that. If you deposit on one chain, you can often withdraw on another. I think it's a stopgap, which the industry has naturally evolved, and some bridges are close to that as well. But I'll let others answer. But I think that's something we have seen happen, but I think it's a temporary solution.
I think we have to be very careful with a conglomerate dominating the distribution of assets across chains, especially those that operate in CeFi, DeFi, act as liquidity providers, are providers of platforms that guys are using. Like you don't want one organization's hands in too many of the cookie jars, because then it takes away from really what is the underbelly of decentralization, right? You have one controlling dominant force controlling all of the movement of capital, and then you have no control over costs, over user accessibility. It becomes an environment that I don't think anybody really wants. It's almost like antitrust in TradFi. You got to be really careful about who's controlling the pipes. You can go back to as advanced and as unique and as incredible as all the innovation that is occurring in DeFi, you can even go back to the most basic of industries, such as the railroads, right? Like early days. Like, you cannot have one guy building all of the distribution lines in North America, Western Europe, Japan, wherever it might be. You can't have that type of control. So I would really err on the side of caution about promoting, a Binance or an FTX or one of those large, organizations dominating that. That's kind of what I would say to that point.
Yeah, I would add really quick on that. It goes against the spirit of crypto and DeFi in general, just because it's like that's too big to fail. That could lend itself to censorship, to permission. It's antithetical to the whole ecosystem, but it's also natural for that to crop up, and that's what we're dealing with now to a degree. And that's why it's been so devastating to see some of these companies fail. They've touched so many, contagion, right? They've touched so many people and other organizations.
But what do you think there's a world where, the end user, right? The 6 billion of us out there that aren't, I say us, so I'll put myself in their shoes. But the 6 billion people that are out there that even with today with Facebook and Instagram and all these people out there that that don't understand Web3 or the idea of digital ownership. I mean, is there any risk, right, in them being willing to say, what, screw it, like I don't care, I just want it to be easy, right? Like I just want a one-click way to like make all of this happen and forget the rest, right? Which puts a lot of onus on us in this day and age and right now to make sure that all of those pipes and stuff are there. And like what I was reading earlier today that I think even kind of comes in even more, especially on the interoperability side, is that if things start to get dominated by these kind of like central portions, which I was reading a thing on central bank digital currencies, and if you start to have governments that are creating their standardized currency, that becomes very scary in the sense that you can, like, overnight the Fed could become the largest potential exchange of some stable token, and then if they support interoperability or if they don't, it kind of turns into this very weird position that we end up in, which kind of leads to go into like if we don't do interoperability, right? So if for instance that this area of the world doesn't get enough attention, will DeFi survive, right? Like if we don't enable this, is there a future where like DeFi is dead, right? If we don't solve the interoperability problem.
I think it's unlikely. Like this is like such a Darwinian Cambrian explosion type of space that if the Fed makes a dollar coin and it's on the Fed network, someone's just going to create a wrapper for it and like a bridge system for it, if it's even possible. Or worst case, they'll have a centralized trust system like, Circle and USDC. Like I think it's inevitable that there's going to be something that happens if there's an opportunity, because that's what Darwinism is. That's what this explosion of experiments is.
Mm-hmm. Will, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a few different aspects to that, but for one, like, I agree that there's so much innovation happening at the moment that's all competing with each other. We will see evolving solutions that I think will eventually make it possible for everyone to be using these systems, and they'll beat out, I believe, centralized solutions, mainly because there's just this sort of aspect of permissionless innovation, the fact anyone can create anything and it can interoperate and sort of build on top of everything else in the space, kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, does beat any single entity, whether it's government or a huge conglomerate, because of the nature of what DeFi can do. And we've seen the demand, it's been proven. The question is how it's going to manifest itself, whether it's going to be in this kind of multi-chain ecosystem we're seeing now, or the eventual convergence back to one chain, which might be something that manages to scale better than the other solutions. That's still unknown. And in the short term, there's a lot of challenges to get there. On the kind of wallet point you mentioned, I think it's true that we're not going to see 6 billion people want to have a private key that they could lose and hold it the way that they do now with MetaMask or something else. Wallets are also going to have to adapt to the fact of having more people on board. And there are already fairly good examples. Near is an interesting blockchain which has something like this, where you can essentially onboard initially using just an email address and a password. And as you get more and more funds, you're encouraged to upgrade to a private key or to a hardware wallet, but you keep the same address, same kind of account. And there's other sort of social recovery type solutions, or NPC where you can have it one part of the key kept by a company that you trust and maybe a friend to recover in the case where you can't access your funds, and you can use all sorts of. This is just the beginning, I think, of experimentation around these, but that's an area that will need to be solved. Otherwise, I agree, we're never going to see 6 billion people using DeFi the way that they do today. And most people will never want to and shouldn't really ever just have a private key they keep on their laptop or hardware wallet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm like, so when I think about, when we get to 6 billion people, or 7 billion people into DeFi and Web3, we've got things like insurance, right? And we've got, banking the unbanked and all of this kind of stuff being enabled through Web3 into DeFi. It starts to draw some like interesting parallels, right? And it starts to, once it grows to that level, it's, I've heard people say, and John, I would love your perspective on this, is that I've heard people mention that, that like even in the future, like DeFi will need to stay very tightly correlated to TradFi, right? And that it will need to stay very tightly correlated with like global economics in the TradFi world. Do you think that this is like true? Do you think it will stick, be very sticky to what goes on in the TradFi?
So let's talk about the reasons why DeFi is so tightly correlated right now, and then let's try to see if we can break the reasons for the decoupling or the removal of that correlation. So the reason why we're so tightly correlated, especially right now over the last 6 to 12 months, is DeFi crypto overall is just it's one of the risks. It's a risky asset, right? So all risky assets globally, they'll trade very tightly in periods of great periods of volatility, right? It's very difficult for the fundamental drivers behind DeFi or behind any other risk asset to really cause a decoupling from things like the Nasdaq or global the US dollar, things like that. Like all of these, not the US dollar, but other risk assets. So in order for us to really decouple from other risky assets, are the demand drivers and the growth drivers for DeFi, they really have to stand apart. And in order for that to happen, I think the very basis for this conversation, interoperability, is key to that decoupling. It's important for the industry to advance, grow, for the pipes to improve, and for more multi-chain, safer, secure, the real fundamentals that are going to set us apart from everything else. Until that happens, you're not going to get rising adoption rates, and you're not going to get lower correlations to other risk assets. You're just going to be lumped into the same fundamental buckets that move everything else.
Mm-hmm. And so like in my mind, and I want to keep it on the interoperability side, but this part like kind of fascinates me like to a degree. So I'm going to dig a little bit. Is that, you mentioned is that, so as they start to like actually decouple, right? That means that, in my understanding, is that, that means that like new value has to be created, right? And stored and stay within the Web3 universe, right? Within the metaverse. I don't even know if I like saying that word anymore, but like within the Web3 universe, right? If it's not correlated anymore, then in my mind, let me try to sum this up, is that it means that we are creating value within the digital space, right? That can be transferred, that does not depend on moving outside of it to traditional fiat, right? And I think that some of the reason why there's that, some of the correlation also may be because people are basically using crypto right now as an investment vehicle to try to make money, and they're trying to convert it back into fiat, or they're buying crypto with fiat, and it's that part that kind of ties them at the hip some, and there's less of that mass value creation that's sticking over time, where people are keeping their money in the DeFi space rather than trying to move it out. I mean, do you think, am I like just wildly off track here, or does that make sense to anyone? Or I just had too much coffee today.
I think you're right. Like most people participating in crypto are speculators, and they're looking to get in and out. Hence why you have like so much volatility. Like that's why we have 90% drops in Ethereum or like 80% drops in Bitcoin. That is why. I do think that there's clearly 20% or higher that stay in, and they stay in because they're true believers, or they see opportunities that they can take advantage of, whether it's feast or famine. You know, in a bear market, there's still DEXs and there's still liquidity mining things you can do to make money. There's still new protocols being launched, and you can use them and maybe entitle yourself to an airdrop. There's still opportunities in the bear market, and there's opportunities that necessitate you being in the space. But I think that those are definitely, again, they're more for more sophisticated users. They're not for the average user, which is on balance a speculator, and they're facing whatever the trend is.
Got it. Well, so we are wrapping up on time. Thank you all for coming. This was amazing. Thank you, Dcentral, for putting this on and having us. And before we sign off, we definitely want to let everyone know where to find you and where to follow you. So we'll do around the squares again. So Alex, if you want to lead us off, where can we find and or follow you at?
So I made it easy. So if you look down there, Tender Finance is our website, and @Cryptogration is my social media handle. That's my Twitter, Telegram, whatever. Check me out on Twitter. I tweet some interesting, fun stuff, retweet things I find funny. And that's it.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming. John, what about you?
Yeah, so you can find everything you want to know about our company, liquimeta.io, all over LinkedIn, Twitter, all the social media chains. So thanks again for having me. It was a great experience. Great to meet all of you.
Of course. And Will?
You can find our web at Rhino.fi is where you can go track Polygon and soon and also search for diverse content and articles and YouTube videos showing how to use what we built.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And also Will's at 75th and Columbus. If you're in New York, you can also go find him. He's in a car. No, and I am Cory. You can find me at Gigster.com, or if you go to YouTube and search Gigster, we do a bunch of fun ones of these. But thank you so much again for Dcentral for having me and letting me host this panel. This was a great time. And with that, I guess I kick it back over to David to keep this thing running.